Hi class 7 students. So in today's English video, we are going to learn about a very useful punctuation mark. To know more about it, stay tuned for a few seconds. Welcome back to another video lesson, students. So in today's video lesson we will be learning all about the punctuation mark known as the colon. So first we will see what is a colon, and then we will look into some of the uses of the colon. So getting into what is a colon. So the colon is a punctuation mark that is broadly used to mean, that is to say, or which are. So you can now imagine, like whenever you see a colon in a sentence, it is used to mean that is to say or which are. And I'm sure you all know very well that a colon looks like two vertical dots. It is shaped like two vertical dots.
So now that we know what is a colon, let's get straight into some of the uses of the colon. So, the first use of the colon is that it is used to denote an item or a series of items in a list. But here, a very important thing to remember is that we do not capitalize the first letter unless and until it is a proper noun. Let's take a few examples. The company is hiring for the following roles: sales assistant, manager, accountant, and the receptionist. So here let's break up the sentence into two parts. The first part of the sentence is telling you that there are some roles the company is hiring for, and the second part of the sentence goes on to list out these roles. And if you remember what I told, the first letter after the colon is not capitalized. So here the sales assistant is the first word after the colon, and the sales, the word sales is not a capital, and because of this is a list, we have used a colon before starting out this list. Now let's take a look at another example. We have visited 3 cities in Europe: the Paris, Berlin, and Amsterdam. Again, that is a list in the second part of the sentence. So before starting this list, I have used a colon, and now while I said in the beginning that we don't capitalize the first letter of the colon, in this case you will see that the word Paris is actually capital, but that's because Paris is a proper noun, and as you all can see and know, we always capitalize proper nouns when we are talking and writing them in a sentence. And now another thing to note here is that we don't use a colon in lists that follow a verb or a preposition. Let's take a few examples. I bought apples, milk, and cereal. Now here you will see that apples, milk, and cereal are a list. However, we will not use a colon after the word bought before we start out this list, because the word bought is a verb. And now the correct way to say the sentence is either to simply say I bought apples, milk, and cereal without any other punctuation marks, or if we want to use accordingly, we would have to rephrase the sentence a bit and say I bought 3 things: apples, milk, cereal. Now here you will see that the colon is after the word things, which is neither a verb or a preposition. It is just a noun, and hence we can use a colon after it. So just remember that do not use a colon after a verb and preposition, even if there is a list coming after that verb or a preposition.
Now children, let's take a look at some more uses of the colon. So we use colons to introduce quotations with more than one line. Let's take a look at an example. My father always tells me chase happiness, not money. Being content is more important than being rich or successful. Now you'll see the quotation here has two lines. One is chase happiness, not money, and the second line is being content is important than being rich or successful. So in such cases, you know when there are quotations that have more than one line, you'll use a colon to introduce this quotation mark, right? So another example will be the poster said help wanted. Ask the counter for details. Once again, the quoted part here is actually comprised of two sentences. One is help wanted and the other is ask the counter for details. So once again, to introduce this quotation, I will use a colon. Now, moving on to more uses of the colon. The colon is used between two independent clauses when the second clause explains, illustrates, paraphrases or expands on the first clause. Now let's take an example for each of these four types. But first let's recap what an independent clause is. Now an independent clause is a clause that can function independently and makes complete sense on its own. So let's take a look at some examples. Love is blind. It can cloud one's judgment. Now here you will see there are two independent clauses. Love is blind and it can cloud one's judgment. And the second clause is actually just explaining the first clause, right? It is explaining what is meant by saying love is blind. It means that it can cloud one's judgment. So here it's explaining the first clause. The second clause is explaining the first clause. And so we use a colon between the first clause and the second clause. The next example is, she had two choices. She could run or she could fight. Once again, you'll see two independent clauses here. And the second clause here is actually illustrating the first clause, because the first clause is telling you she had two choices, and the second clause is actually going on to list out these choices. So it's illustrating the first clause, and we will place a colon after the first clause and before the second clause, just like the first example, right? I hope you understood till this part. Now, let's look at the third sentence. So, the third sentence is, the bus was very crowded. The bus was very crowded and there was barely any place to stand. Now here the second clause is actually paraphrasing the first clause, or it is saying the first clause in another different words. So if someone says there were barely no place to stand on the bus, that's just another way of saying that the bus was very crowded. So this means that it is paraphrasing the first clause, and hence we place a colon between the two clauses. Let's take a look at the final example. Life is an adventure. It is full of ups and downs. So here the second clause is simply expanding on the first clause. It is contributing to the idea of life being an adventure by saying that it is an adventure because it is full of ups and downs. So in this case as well, we will place a colon between the first and the second clauses. Now we will move on to the final use of the colon.
So we use the colon while making a bulleted or number list where each item is placed on a separate line. And to understand this better, take a careful look at the example on the screen. So here you see there is a list being given. It says instructions for the camping trip, right? And then it goes on to list the 4 instructions on separate lines and pay attention to the way in which it is presented. So after the line instructions for the camping trip, I have placed a colon and then I have listed each instruction on a separate line. So whenever in your written work you are presenting such a list, you know where there is a header and then there is a bulleted or a numbered list beneath that with each item on a separate line. Make sure that you place a colon after the first line or after the heading, which is actually introducing your list.
So students, that brings us to an end to today's session, and in today's session we have learned what is a colon and we have learned about the different uses of the colon in sentences. So thank you all, and I'll catch you soon in another video of class 7 English. Till then, keep learning, happy learning, and enjoy learning with Tejas Education and Learning. If you all like this video very much, then please click the like button, share this video with your friends, and subscribe to this YouTube channel Tejas Education and Learning. Thank you all. Bye bye. Take care.